Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and this is Top 5 Wednesday. If you're new to Top 5 Wednesday and you'd like to find out more about it, I'll leave the Goodreads group and the creators' links all in the description box below. Today's topic is books that you disliked but still like to discuss. I have a little bit of trouble with this topic because if I dislike a book, like really hate it, I don't want to talk about it. I don't hate talking about books. Maybe a little ranting, but nothing too serious. If I really hate a book, it's generally for a reason that I can't really reconcile anymore. So for the purposes of my video, I'm going to list books that were circa 3-star reads for me so that I didn't like them, but I didn't hate them. Dislike falls right in the middle of those two categories. I know I'm not a big channel, but controversial videos like this always tend to get more views, at least from what I've seen. So I'm going to preface this with a little disclaimer. If I disliked your favorite book in the whole world, it's not the end of the world. We're allowed to have different opinions, you're allowed to disagree with me, and that's absolutely fine. Now that that's out of the way, let's get started. Book number 5 is a pretty popular one from a pretty popular series. It is City of Fallen Angels, the 4th book of the Mortal Instruments series by Cassandra Clare. I almost called it the Mortal Instruments trilogy, and hopefully that'll let you know why I am so about this book. I like the way City of Glass ended. I think The Mortal Instruments was perfect as a trilogy. So the reason I sort of like to discuss this book is for ranting purposes. I don't think The Mortal Instruments needed to be 6 books. I think the story wrapped up just fine with 3. I think the last 3 books of that 6-book series were basically their own story. They almost felt like fan fiction of the original trilogy, which is fine, and I'm still trash for them, and I'm still trash for Cassandra Clare. I just didn't think they were necessary, and I think City of Fallen Angels is definitely the weakest of that secondary trilogy. Please don't hate me, Cassie stans. I really love her books, just not that one so much. Number 4 on my list is the Selection series. So The Selection, The Elite, and The One, all by Kiera Cass. I didn't read the other 2. Again, like The Mortal Instruments, I thought that they were unnecessary additions to the series. It's not that I disliked it, it's more that I'm fascinated with why people like them. So The Selection has basically been called a YA dystopian version of The Bachelor, and I 100% agree, and it fascinates me a lot that there was this subplot of a civil war. I didn't know a civil war could be a subplot. I would think that that would be the main plot, and there was such potential for it to be more than it was, and it just sort of never happened, and that really bummed me out. Yes, I loved reading the romance. I'm absolute trash for The Bachelor and therefore trash for the Selection series as far as that goes. But if you're gonna include a civil war, it's gotta show up again at some point as more than just a means to a dramatic finale. You can't just not explain why people want to kill your royal family. I'm also kind of upset at The Selection because it had potential to be this super feminist book and it just failed. There was a lot of girl hate, there was a lot of slut shaming, and I'm really not into that sort of stuff, so that kind of put it on my list. Number 3 on my list is Going to Get Me Yelled At. Maybe not as much as number 2. Regardless, it was a super popular book on BookTube, and my issue with it is that I don't understand why. And that is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. My issue with Caraval is not that it's super poorly written. It's not that the plot is super derivative. It's not any of those things. It's just that I was so disappointed. Caraval marketed itself as a young adult version of The Night Circus. If you're new to this channel, which all of you are, it's a relatively new channel, I haven't really gone on a Night Circus rant yet, but it's one of my favorite standalones of all time. Basically, if you're gonna call yourself the next Night Circus, you have some really big shoes to fill, and I don't think Caraval was ready to fill those shoes. The setting didn't feel magical. The writing was really flowery and poetic, but it felt forced at times, and I'm not a huge fan of that. My main issue was that I didn't understand the characters' motivations, and I don't think the characters themselves understood their motivations, which really turned me off as a reader. Other characters are allowed to doubt the main character's motivations, but I don't think the reader is supposed to, and I found myself doubting every single page of Caraval. I didn't believe it, and I have a really high suspension of disbelief tolerance, so that really disappointed me. Also, the whole abuse thing, where the father abuses his 2 daughters, can't get into that. There was really never any explanation for that, and I realize that abuse is not something that has to be explained, that it's really kind of random and horrible, and that's sort of the point. But I kind of want to know why, and I want to see that resolved, and hopefully it'll happen in the 2nd book. I don't know. That squeaked me out. Didn't love it. Damn it, Caraval. I really wanted to love it. I just didn't. That's sort of a running thread, is that I really wanted to love all these books, and I couldn't. And I think that's why I like to discuss them. because of the rant potential. Number 2 is another booktube favorite, and it is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, or Maas. I think it's Sarah J. Maas. This is another book where I was disappointed by the execution of what was a really cool premise, and the reason I like discussing this one so much is because of what that premise is. Everyone got really on the hype train for this book because we were all so starved for a strong female character who's unapologetic about who she is. And I will give it to Sarah. Selena Saradathian is definitely that character. I just didn't like the execution. Problem with Throne of Glass is that it calls itself a high fantasy when really it's more of a romantic pseudo-fantasy. So what paranormal romance is to urban fantasy, this book is to high fantasy, and that's absolutely fine. Like I said, I'm trash for relationships. I will definitely be continuing this series because I'm so addicted to Selena, Kale, and Dorian. Like, I'm into that. I will be reading more because of that, but the fantasy elements definitely took a back seat, and that sort of makes me meh about it. But I digress. The fascinating thing about this is how we as readers, particularly young adult readers, who seem to, if booktube is any sort of indication of how it is in the rest of the world, be predominantly female, it's definitely a reflection that we want to see more girl characters kicking ass regularly. And that sort of massive social phenomenon is fascinating to me, and it's definitely a sort of thing I'd like to talk about. And book number 1, Cool Your Jets. It'd be impossible to be more controversial about anything on booktube, I guess, than Throne of Glass. It is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. The book Ender's Game I read when I was younger, and I didn't like it very much, for I don't know what reason, but what really makes this a book that I like to discuss is not itself and the discussion that sort of goes around the Ender's Game, but the discussion that follows Orson Scott Card. One of the few things I remember as a kid after reading this book was the discussion of Orson Scott Card as a person. His inflammatory, pretty homophobic remarks made him a hot topic, especially for those of us who were sort of in the literary sphere in my elementary and middle schools. I think it was the first time that I realized that an author could be like a brand or a famous person rather than just the secret genius behind a book. And the reason I like talking about it is I only found out about how homophobic he really is after reading his books, and as I get older I'm like, should I have patronized him at all? Why did I lend my readership to his books? Do I want to support this author? Can you ever separate the author from the book? Should you separate the artist from the art? I think those are all definitely things that are worthy of discussion, and if any of you are interested about them, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to talk about this. Actually, I'd love to talk about any of these books down below with you, whether you loved or hated them. Maybe you can change my mind about one of your favorites, or maybe we can just rant together about being robbed of some wonderful, wonderful thing. Anyway, that's all I have for you today, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys!